You know what's weird? We obsess over boomers and their real estate. We analyze millennials and their avocado toast. Gen Z and their side hustles get entire think pieces. But there's this whole generation sitting quietly in the middle, managing money in the strangest way possible, and nobody talks about them. Generation X, born between 1965 and 1980. They're your co-worker who quietly amassed more wealth than millennials could dream of, yet behave like they're one paycheck from disaster. Your uncle who has $50,000 in savings but won't replace his 15-year-old Toyota. The friend who dropped $500 on concert tickets but uses coupons at the grocery store. And here's what nobody tells you. Their money psychology is completely unlike any other generation. And it all traces back to one specific moment in economic history that broke their brains in the most interesting way. Picture this. It's 1983. You're 10 years old and your dad takes you to the bank. You watch him deposit his paycheck. Same company he's worked at for 15 years. Same steady amount every 2 weeks. The teller knows him by name. He's got a pension, a savings account that actually pays interest. The mortgage will be paid off in 12 years. Right on schedule. Everything makes sense. Work hard, save money, retire comfortably. The formula works. Now, flash forward to 2008. You're 35 years old. You followed the formula. You did everything right. And you just watched your 401k cut in half, your home value crater, and your secure company start laying off people who'd been there for 20 years. The formula was a lie, and that betrayal shaped every dollar decision they'd make for the rest of their lives. Here's the first weird thing about Gen X and money. They're simultaneously the most anxious about retirement and the most consistent savers. According to the 2023 Transamerica Center for Retirement Studies, 70% of Gen X say they're terrified about retirement, but they also have the second highest 401k contribution rates of any generation. They don't believe it'll work, but they do it anyway. Psychologists call this defensive pessimism. Basically, you assume everything will go wrong, so you prepare obsessively and then you're covered when it does. It's exhausting, but for Gen X, it's kept them alive. And honestly, they're not wrong to be paranoid. They watched their parents' pensions disappear. They graduated into a recession. They bought houses right before the crash. They're not pessimists. They're realists who've been burned too many times. Let's talk about something Gen X invented before millennials gave it a cute name, the side hustle. Federal Reserve data shows Gen X has higher rates of self-employment and secondary income streams than both boomers and millennials. But here's the twist. Most of them still keep their day jobs. They're not trying to quit the 9 to 5 and live their dreams. They're building escape tunnels while keeping the main exit open. Your Gen X neighbor isn't flipping houses because they love real estate. They're doing it because they watched their colleague get walked out with a cardboard box after 20 years of loyalty. It's 1995. You're watching your mom's company downsize. People who'd worked there since before you were born are suddenly unemployed at 50. No warning, no safety net, just gone. That image burned into every Gen X brain. Never ever depend on one source of income. Not because you're entrepreneurial, because you're terrified. And that's why they have the Etsy shop and the consulting gig and the rental property. It's not ambition, it's insurance. Here's something that confuses marketers. Gen X will job hop without hesitation, but they're weirdly loyal to brands. An Adobe study found Gen Xers are 34% more likely than millennials to stick with brands from their youth. Even when cheaper options exist. They'll quit a Fortune 500 company via email, but they'll drive across town for the coffee shop where the owner knows their order. They have zero loyalty to institutions and intense loyalty to people and products they trust. The psychology here is actually pretty straightforward. Institutions betrayed them. People haven't, or at least when people betray you, you can hold them accountable. When a corporation does it, you get a severance check and a form letter. So yeah, they're still buying Levi's and listening to the same bands and using the same brands they loved in high school. Not because they're stuck in the past, because those things didn't lie to them. Now, here's where Gen X gets really interesting. They have high savings rates and emergency funds, but they also pioneered spending on experiences. Eventbrite found Gen Xers spend about $3,000 a year on concerts, travel, and live events, more than any other generation in actual dollars. They're financially paranoid and experientially extravagant at the same time. And it's the exact same psychology driving both behaviors. They save obsessively because systems can't be trusted. They spend on experiences because stuff can't be trusted either. Your house can go underwater. Your car loses value. Your possessions mean nothing when the economy tanks. But that Pearl Jam concert in 1994, nobody can repossess that memory. It's actually brilliant when you think about it. They figured out that in an unstable economy, experiences give you better return on investment than things. The bank can't foreclose on the trip you took. You can't lose your memories in a market crash. Let's talk about Gen X and financial advisors because this relationship is complicated. Data from Cerule Associates shows they're the least likely generation to use traditional financial advisors. They'd rather research and manage everything themselves, but they're also the most anxious about whether they're doing it right. They don't want help, but they're terrified of messing up. Here's the thing. Gen X came of age when you could actually learn things from books and figure stuff out on your own. They're the last generation that believes self-education is real. So, they read financial books, they build spreadsheets, they manage their own portfolios because they genuinely think they can learn how. But they also watched what happened when their parents trusted experts with their pensions. So they'll educate themselves, verify everything twice, and trust no one's advice without doing their own homework first. It's not arrogance, it's self-defense. Here's a stat that surprises people. Gen X carries the highest total debt of any generation, according to Experian. But they're also the most strategic about it. They'll take a $400,000 mortgage but refuse to carry a $2,000 credit card balance. The difference: control. A mortgage is predictable, fixed payment, clear timeline. You know exactly what you're dealing with. Credit card debt is chaos. It's quicksand that never ends. And they watched it swallow their parents whole in the 80s and 90s. University of Michigan research found Gen X witnessed unprecedented consumer debt in their childhood, then saw the consequences in 2008. The lesson wasn't never borrow, it was only borrow what you can map to completion. So they'll leverage debt for assets they believe will appreciate, real estate, business investments, strategic moves, but buying a couch on credit, charging a vacation, that's the debt that kills you slowly, and they know it. One last thing that seems old-fashioned, but is actually genius. Gen X keeps paper records. ARP found 61% of them maintain physical files of important documents compared to just 34% of millennials. They're not technologically illiterate. They built the internet, but they also remember when companies lost records and databases crashed and digital promises evaporated. They trust technology to work most of the time. They trust paper to work all of the time.